Hey there, welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Sequel Q&A. My name's Doug, and this one is a special video interview, of course, because you can see me and you're on YouTube or on our website, sequelsonly.com, and you're here to check out the man of the hour. This week's guest, special effects, visual effects, concept artist, Eddie Yang. Eddie's story was so cool because at the age of 17, on his Christmas break, he was working on Predator. When I was 17 on Christmas break, I was probably barfing in some alley somewhere after partying too hard. I don't know. But Eddie's story was so cool because he went out. He had from a young age, Famous Monsters magazine and seeing American Werewolf in London were like ingrained in his brain. And he fell in love with the makeup aspect and how things worked rather than the movie itself. And then funny to think about it, years later, he's working for Rick Baker at his studio for so many years on so many epic films. So we talked about how he started, memorable moments from his films, and so much more. Eddie was great. Any of the links, anything that we talk about during the interview, I'm going to put in the notes below so you could check him out. You can check out his studio, Deity Creative. I'm going to put that in the episode notes along with his Instagram, Deity Creative's Instagram, and so much more. And do us a favor, follow us on all social media at Sequels Only, and check out our website, sequelsonly.com. And man, before I start, one more thing, hit subscribe. Come on. Every time that bell rings, an angel gets his wings, and you get a new sequel review or an amazing interview that we have done. Without further ado, here is special effects, visual effects. He does it all. Eddie Yang. Cool. Well, what I like to do with these is find out people, how they started, how they got to where they got in the industry, because it's not an industry that has a very high success rate. So where did you grow up, Eddie?
I was lucky enough to be born in Los Angeles, California. Right, the heart of Hollywood.
No way. So right in the thick of it.
Yeah, and that does make quite a difference because a lot of the coworkers and people that I've met that do the same thing that I do had to immigrate from other states, cities at a very young age, and that means they had to be relatively old, 18, 20s or something like that, to be able to be old enough to actually move to another city, work for their idols, and make a living, get their own apartments, and so on. So I count myself super lucky compared to those people because I was already here, and all the places and people that I wanted to work for and visit were literally within 30 minutes. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Did you have any connections? Do you have any family?
No.
Like that worked in the industry?
God, I wish. I mean, I dreamed of that. And I thought it'd be so much easier to get into the industry. I mean, I was at a very small school, and there was like two people that visited. It was a grade school. I was like in third grade, fourth grade. And, no, actually maybe sixth grade or seventh grade. But the one guy that I knew, his name was John Eads, and his dad's name was Hank Eads, and he worked as a makeup artist. And I'm like, oh my God, your dad's a makeup artist. Does he know Rick Baker? Does he know Dick Smith? Does he know all that stuff? And he was aware of them. He said, yeah, I'll have my dad talk to you if you want to call him. I was like, oh, yeah. And then, because I was at a crossroads at that point in time. But that was the closest to knowing somebody that was in the industry. And then this guy that named Mark Marshall came to our grade school, and he was like the personal assistant, I found out later, to like Spielberg and Lucas or something, and he had pictures of himself with R2-D2, and I was just like, oh my God, you're my idol. And so those were the only two people that I kind of knew. So, but
well, those are the right ones based on, where you ended up. At what age did you fall in love with movies? Were you always into like monsters and like the makeup aspect?
Yes. I didn't even really comprehend movies. I mean, I knew Star Wars, obviously, and I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. But every other movie, I pretty much watched it for the effects only. I just
wow.
watch the effects sequence. And when I got into it, I was still actually pretty scared of gore and slasher movies and all that stuff. And like, for instance, when I saw American Werewolf in London, I covered my eyes. My dad took me. I covered my eyes through all the scary stuff. But when the werewolf transformation came, I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is what I wanted to do. Same with The Thing, Rob Bottin's effects, John Carpenter's The Thing. Super scared of the gory stuff. That was actually the movie that turned me, where I was like, oh, you know, I can watch this stuff. It's okay. And it was like artistic. So, but
yeah, it's crazy when people love horror or they love those effects. Some people are like, oh man, you like that? It's so gross. I always, at a young age, was so obsessed with how they made that look like it was real. Like it was, like you said, it's art, exactly what it is.
It's art and it's technical. I mean, Tom Savini's kind of associated with all the splatter movies and stuff, and Friday the 13th and all this, like The Prowler, you know. And he wrote a book called Grand Illusions, in which, you know, me and every other probably child dissected it. And it was more like tricks and how he hid the blood tubes and cut away knives and, you know, the animatronics he built for Creepshow and stuff like that. And of course that lured me in and I loved it. And then Rick Baker and Bottin were doing these things that were more character based and like makeups and like huge big blockbuster films at the time and stuff. I was like, whoa, what, you know, essentially the VFX CG department before there was computers, right? So yeah, I mean, it was literally all those things that got me like, whoa, what's going on? So I never really paid attention to the director, the story, or the setting, or all that stuff. I strictly watched the effects, and I was just like, how did they do this? And what's going on?
Yeah.
So,
well, it's good that you did. So what was your first, like, how old were you when you saw American Werewolf in London and you're covering your eyes? Is that elementary school?
11 or something. I think, if I'm wrong, it's 81. I was born in 69, so, you know, roughly 10 years.
Yeah, so right there, 11, 12.
I think it was 80. Yeah. So, but to tell you the truth, I mean, I saw Rick recently. I mean, we're really good friends. We just went out to lunch recently.
I could tell, like, looking at your IMDb, like, you worked with him over so many different, like, eras of his later part of his career, too, which is awesome.
Yeah, which is so cool, because I, like, dreamed about meeting him.
Yeah.
I would have, like, dreams about meeting him in a restaurant. Like, he was my idol. He's absolute idol. And my friends at school were like, oh, I wish Magic Johnson's my idol, or Joe Montana or whoever. Sorry, it's my computer. My computer is my lighting system here, so
it's okay.
But yeah, I mean, I dreamed of meeting Rick Baker and getting to work for him for so many years, and now being like friends with him that he's retired is so incredible. I'm so thankful for that. That's so cool. But we actually chatted about this a couple days ago when I went out to lunch with him. Incredible Melting Man. That was the first horror movie I ever saw. And I was 7 years old, and my cousin, who was an immigrant from Taiwan, didn't know. He thought it was a comedy. You know, he was taking me to a borderline NC-17 horror movie because of all the gore. And I was freaked out. It was like the Melting Man tore a guy's head off. It was the first time I saw decapitation. He like ripped a chunk out of a nurse's face, and he was melting, like realistically, like with bone structure and everything, not comedic at all. Yeah, that traumatized me for decades. I've told Rick this like 3 or 4 times. He never remembers each time, but because he has like 3D scans of the original Melting Man heads, and I was just like, oh my God,
no way.
That killed my entire childhood. But
so what was your first step? Like, obviously when you were watching those movies, that's what you were paying attention to. When did you think like, hey, this is something I want to do?
I remember distinctly, it was Famous Monsters magazine, and my neighbor had it. And there was an article on Lon Chaney, and it had his makeup kit, and they were floating out all these faces, and it was like Man of a Thousand Faces. What is this? And I immediately got obsessed with it. I guess I have an obsessive personality or something, because I ran home, asked my dad if he had a box that looked like a tackle box or something, and then I stole makeup from my mom's. Can I have this? Can I have that? And start putting it in the tackle box so I could have a makeup kit just like Lon Chaney. And I don't know what it was. I mean, at that age, I was maybe 6 or 7 or something. And I was just like, what? So that sparked it. And then a kid at school gave me a book called Movie Monsters by Alan Ormsby, and had these incredible drawings in them. And at the end, it showed kids how to make themselves into movie monsters. There was a paper mache bag for Frankenstein for the flat head. There was
That's awesome.
Vampire Dracula. You could draw a widow's peak with your mom's eyeliner, and it told you what you could use. You could ask your parents for it. Warts, you use the eyelash adhesive duo, and you put it on a plate, and you could peel it off later and stick it onto your face. I mean, like real techniques. It was so cool. It was like having YouTube back in 1978 or something. So I did every single thing that was in that book. And yeah, those are the two impetuses that kind of started me on this journey. So.
Wow. So was it like in high school that you tried to like move your way into actually like being on a movie set?
Yeah, it was like, roughly. I was like 13 years old, 14 years old. We had just moved, and then we had a 3-car garage. That was an amazing, luxurious thing to have. Because the one garage, I mean, when I saw that one garage, I'm like, we only have 2 cars. Hey, can I have that as my studio space? And my parents were primarily against me becoming an effects artist. They wanted me to become a doctor, like everybody else in the family, right? And they were like, "Yeah, sure, you can go ahead. You can take over the garage." So that became my studio, and I made that. I did all my masks, all this stuff in that little space. So, and that was probably right before high school, and then I was lucky enough to meet a couple of pros. So my friend Simon Loins, to this day I'll never forget it, because we were bored, summer vacation, looking through the phone book. If people don't know what that is, that was pre-internet. And we looked up makeup effects studios' names. Don Post Studio, right? Don Post made these incredible, thick, cool latex masks that I tried to collect. My parents wouldn't let me have a bunch for whatever reason. I had like 1 or 2, but I knew the whole collection, right? And I wanted them. But he was in North Hollywood, and I asked my dad, where is this and stuff. He was on his way to work. So he was cool enough, because I couldn't drive, to drop me and Simon off at Don Post Studios on summer vacation. And so Simon and I went in, and we talked to Don Post Jr., and he said, "Kid, go to medical school. Don't do this crap. You're going to regret it." And so he's so depressing. And then I was so depressed, I was like, "Hey, I know another makeup effects studio." So I looked in the phone book. They had phone books, at a public phone thing. And I'm like, makeup effects studios right around the corner, so we could walk there. So Simon and I walked over to makeup effects lab, which at the time was Al Lapone and Doug White, I believe, that ran it. And my friend Simon literally pushed me through the door. Like, I was a little shy to go in. He pushed me and made a noise. Al Lapone was there. He looked up and he said, "Oh, hi, can I help you?" And, I introduced myself. I said, I've been reading about all this stuff through books and Tom Savini and Lee Bagan books and Corson books. And I want to be an effects artist. I learned about foam latex. I never even touched foam latex. He goes, "Oh, let me introduce you to Howard Berger," who later became Howard Berger of KMB, right? Academy Award winning Howard Berger. And he said, "Hey, Howard, will you show this kid around?" And Howard's like, "Yeah, sure." He was just getting ready to leave for Day of the Dead for months in Pittsburgh. And he took me through makeup effects labs. Like, this is this, this is this. And I said, oh, is that a foam latex appliance? And Howard said, yeah, it sure is. You know, can I touch it? I've never felt it before. And it's like, it's so soft. I only read about it and never mixed it myself. Howard was amazing. He was so open about everything. And he said, I'm leaving for Pittsburgh, but hey, if you go around the corner, literally around the corner, was John Beekler's makeup lab, and my buddy
oh wow,
Bob Kurtzman's working there. So go, talk to him. And so I did, of course. And Howard took off for Day of the Dead, and I didn't know at the time Howard, Greg Nicotero, a guy named Dave Kinlan, amazing animatronics guy, and Bob Kurtzman all kind of lived together in the same house in Reseda. So while Howard was gone, Bob and I hung out. I said, I've never seen a full head cast done. I've read about it. I've seen it in books. And I've tried it and it's failed every time. And Bob took me to see a full head cast being done out of alginate at John Beekler's studio.
Wow.
And him and I got this friendship. And I ended up mowing Howard's lawn in his house. So just to be around them, and they were kind enough to say, hey, we need our lawn mowed, and we'll pay you. I think the going rate was $5. They paid me like $20 or something to mow their lawn. So I was so fortunate to meet these guys that were like literally minutes away from me. And I'll never forget that. A lot of artists had to come from other places, and I'm very thankful for that. So,
wow, man, especially all those guys. That's so cool. That like legends.
Yeah.
I talked to Brian Usna, who worked with a lot of those guys on all like the Reanimator and like, all those guys. So that's so great.
Brian Usna.
So what was your?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What was your first job? What was the first time you got onto like a set? Was it through them, like a connection through those guys?
Yeah. I mean, my first job technically was Dave Kinlan, because he didn't have a driver's license or something for some reason. He came from the East Coast, so there was all public transportation. And so Dave and I hung out all the time, and he was one of the roommates. But he was more of an animatronics guy, but because he didn't have a car, I ran him around to pick up supplies. So I knew where to get everything, cables, foam latex, rubber, all the materials I needed. It was him that actually said, hey, I'm working on Evil Dead 2, and I'm going to make, I need to make a fiberglass jaw of the main puppet head. Do you want to help me? And I said, yeah, of course.
Wow.
To this day, technically, that was my first job. I think he paid me. I can't remember. And then from then, it was like John Beekler has an opening, and this guy named Bruce Barlow introduced me to John Beekler's and said, hey, if you're not doing anything for the summer, I could get you recommended to John Beekler's on Ghoulies 2. I'm like, yeah, anything.
Oh, nice.
So that was technically my first job on Ghoulies 2, running latex and polyfoam Ghoulies puppets for the movie over summer vacation while I was in high school, I think.
So you were still in high school. Wow. Because IMDb probably has some of these wrong. Because one of the first credits they have on here is like Temple of Doom, and they have Predator on there.
Yeah, Temple of Doom is wrong. I don't know how they got that on.
No, because I was going to say, when you were going through the ages, I was like, yeah, he would have been like 13 years old or 14.
Exactly. No, that's wrong. So sorry about that. But I've tried to get it removed.
No, don't worry about that.
But no, Ghoulies 2 was my first real movie. But then soon after that, while I was still in high school, was Predator. And I got a screen credit. That was like one of my first big screen credits. And that was after the summer of Ghoulies 2. So I was already kind of had one foot in the industry and one foot in high school. And I was like, man, I just want to quit high school. And everybody was like, no, at least finish high school, Yeah. Everybody's so nice. They're so just thoughtful. And they're like, don't ruin your life. At least go to high school. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to go to college, but at least get your GED or high school diploma. So, I'm thankful for all my brothers in the makeup effects industry, for sure.
Yeah, it's so cool that you were that young working on Ghoulies 2. Obviously, Predator is really cool, but Ghoulies 2, I just think that movie has so much, and that's what I wanted to ask you. So you were working on the actual creatures themselves, right? Because there's a part of that movie that it's like the superimposed, like stop motion of their movement. I watched a little bit of it last night, so I was just wondering what you worked on that.
No, I ran the bodies for all the puppets. So I think
Nice.
there's a flying one, the toilet guy, all that stuff. I don't quite remember. All I remember is that was the funnest time. One of the funnest memories I've ever had, because everybody there, the personalities were so amazing. All the to this day, I still know a lot of them, and there was no pressure of, oh, you're doing a bad job, you're gonna. Whatever it was a very free, kind of spirited way of getting me into the industry. And I'll be quite honest, I've never seen the movie, so I have no idea what it is. I did see Predator, but Ghoulies. I mean, a lot of times you actually don't get the chance to see the movies or whatever. And personally, I like non-monster movies. I like dramatic movies, and now I have
really.
I now have, well, actually, through the years, have discovered an appreciation for real filmmakers. You know, Martin Scorsese's, I love Jim Cameron, actually, and European filmmakers. And I really got into film as I got older through a friend of mine, the late Matt Rose. You know, he was such an incredible teacher. He got me into Rick Baker's studio, and we became like very, very close friends. And he had such an amazing film knowledge. I mean, akin to Tarantino and stuff. So, but anyways, I mean, I don't want to detract from. But
oh no,
But yeah,
don't worry about it.
Ghoulies, I was still going to high school, and Predator. I mean, because I met Matt Rose, who was Rick Baker's lead sculptor, and I was just freaking out. I met him at a baseball game, because Howard Berger said, "Hey, after you mow the lawn," Howard was at Rick Baker's studio at the time. He said, "After you mow the lawn, we're having a baseball game. Rick Baker's studio is having a softball whatever game. If you want to come along." I mean, just like, Rick Baker, yeah, I'll finish mowing the lawn. I fucking pack my lawnmower into the truck, and I'm like, I'm there. It's at Brand Park in Glendale. And just being able to see Rick Baker was a dream to me. And he was painting his house at the time. I saw him from afar, never got to really meet him. I was just like, drooling. But I got to talk to Matt Rose the whole time. He was literally sitting next to me. We said hi, and we just bonded. And it was the best friendship I ever had. He passed away, unfortunately, recently. And he was such a mentor to me in so many ways.
Wow.
But yeah,
and that's important. Like you said, like your brothers in the special effects, like to enter in a lot of the behind the scenes, it seems you have to have somebody that looks out for you. And that's great that you had that in the earlier part, especially you're so young. Some people would be like, "Hey kid, get out of here."
Exactly.
But it's great that they took to you.
He was, I think he was a good judge of character, meaning he just saw that this kid lived and dreamed makeup effects. And I made a Joker mask, but I told him, I didn't know what to do with the hair. I don't know how to dye hair. I hate hair. I hate working with hair. And literally the next time I saw him, he had a bag of green yarn. And he combed it out, and he goes, "Hey, I was thinking you could use this, I never forgot that was how kind and thoughtful he was. And he was just like willing to help people. I was like, oh my God, yeah, that would work great. And sure enough, I made a Joker mask with that hair. And ever since then, we were just inseparable. It was just like I hung out with him all the time. And then he eventually introduced me to another artist. I saw his work before I knew him, Steve Wang. And Steve Wang's work is incredible. When I saw it, I was blown away as well as Matt's work. And I met Steve, I think, at John Beekler's for some reason. Somehow we all ended up there. And then Steve eventually went on to art direct and head up Predator at Stan Winston's studio. And because I knew both of them, they were like, "Hey, we need help." Because I don't know if you know the backstory, but Predator was kind of the show nobody wanted to work on because Stan Winston was directing a movie and all of his key guys wanted to work on that. So there's really nobody available to work on Predator. And Boss Films had attempted it, then they stopped. They had a hiatus. Then John McTiernan came to Stan and then said, hey, will you take this on? Stan said, sure. And then put Steve Wang in charge of the art direction and Matt Rose. And then it became what it became. And then they invited me. And I was still going to high school on Christmas vacation. So I had like 2 weeks of Christmas vacation. I said, I can work for you guys for 2 weeks. So yeah. So I worked on Predator for like two weeks. And I'm always included in these crew interview things. And I'm so thankful. But, you know, I only worked on it for 2 weeks, guys. But
everybody's talking about like they're like, what'd you do on Christmas vacation? They're going around like, oh, I went to my aunt's and you were working on Predator.
Yeah. And I'm looking back, I'm so thankful because nobody knew what Predator was at the time. And
yeah, that's true.
When it became what it became, then it was just like, whoa. And I didn't even really, again, pay attention to the movie much. I wasn't into filmmaking. I was just looking at the effects. I took my dad, and it was my first movie credit. And I was like, hey, look, my name's up there. And that was cool. So
that's so awesome. And then, like, right after that, it's like, again, you're still young, but we're at that point with the connections and people knowing that you had, like, that desire to just keep doing it. It, like, took off because right from there, like, 89 on, like you're working so much every year. Sweet Home, Deep Star 6, Return to the Swamp Thing, all in 89.
Yeah, that so that's what I call my pre-Rick Baker days. So I was kind of like a freelance artist, right? And then the industry is so small, and because back then there were no schools, so it's like kind of how do you hire people? How do you find people that are interested in this? So it's kind of word of mouth. So I was lucky enough that my name kind of started getting circulated around. And then when I graduated high school, it was amazing because Steve Wang, Matt Rose, Howard Berger, Bob Kurtzman, they're all in my high school picture. Aaron Kruger, who's now like heading up American Horror Story. They're all in my high school graduation picture in this big group of
That's amazing.
And you know, everybody was kind of like just these young artists starting out. And then it was all kind of strange for me to hear, oh, Eddie Yang's graduated high school. And, you know, I just got calls like crazy and got job offers like crazy. So I started working around. Sweet Home was a Japanese movie and Rick Baker was called to consult on it. So Matt Rose was already working in Japan and said he needed help. So he called me and said, hey, are you willing to fly out to Japan for like a month or two and help me finish this project? And I'm like, yeah. So I told my parents, hey, I'm going to put college plans on hold and I'm going to go to Japan and see how this works out. I mean, they paid me well, and the first time I ever heard of per diem, and I came home with like tons of Japanese model kits, books, inspiration, and bought my first car with my own money. It was just like, Mom and Dad, do I really have to go to college? You know? Yeah. So I'm living my dream. So that was amazing. So, and then, a few other freelance jobs. Before I started at Rick Baker's, and then the rest.
Is that where you got that connection with Rick while you were over there?
Yeah.
So then when you came out, because the next year later is Gremlins 2.
Yeah. That's the first time I kind of met him. I believe I met him and talked to him. It's like the first time. Oh no, there was a Monster Maker contest actually, where we technically first met, shook hands or whatever, because I won. One of the placements for that contest. But so, you know, I kept running into Rick, the baseball game, the monster making contest, now in Japan. So I was like, oh, he's got to notice me, right? Maybe I can work for him one day. So yeah, that was cool. I did meet him in Japan briefly. And then, after Japan is when it kind of started happening. And I feel bad for it. There was a guy named Tim Lawrence that knew about me.
I interviewed him.
Oh, really? before he passed away.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I interviewed him, and then while I was interviewing this guy, Steve Neal, he told me that Tim passed away, and I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I interviewed Tim probably, he was like one of the first interviews I ever did. And I chatted with him, I think like 7 months before he passed away.
Oh, wow. He always has a special place in my heart because he was one of the people that hired me right out of high school. And he had me work on Beetlejuice. Yeah. So he had done
cool.
the stop motion sequences where they pull their faces out and stick their hands and all that stuff. So I was the sculptor that helped him clean up his sculptures and painted all the stop motion models for him. And yeah, it was a bunch of replacement animation, I think is what it's called. And all these, like, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 sculptures that made that sequence. So I'd worked for him. And he always was such a supporter of mine. I was so young. He was so kind to me and just gave me a lot of work, a lot of praises, and a lot of advice. So Tim will always be...
Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that connection. He told me a funny story about that because he said, I worked on these little things for so long, and then there was like a little earthquake, and he like drove down to the studio, and he's like, I went down there and nothing was damaged or something crazy. Like, he's like, 3 months of my life could have been wasted if like that studio got damaged, but he got there, there's nothing.
Yeah, because they were all on a shelf, all 50 the statues, you know, all these little plaster miniatures. Yeah, so labor intensive. Yeah, I mean, and he was a genius. He's a Rick Baker alumni as well. He worked for Rick for many years.
Yeah, he was all the way from the Thriller.
Yep.
That was the first time I think he worked with Rick, was on the Thriller video.
Yeah,
and then he was in the Thriller video too.
Exactly. He's the blue bloated zombie guy. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So Gremlins 2. What were some of the things that you worked on the creatures?
Gremlins 2, I was mainly responsible for the effects. So Steve and Matt had been hired at Rick Baker's studio. And literally every major artist in the film industry right now doing whatever, effects, makeup, specialty costume, just about everybody was on that project. That's a somebody today. Amazing collection of people, probably one of the biggest crews ever assembled for a makeup effects show. And it was my second Rick Baker project. The first one was a small TV show, and then, you know, I didn't know how the industry worked, and they kind of said, okay, go home now, you know, take it off, and then they call me, we'll call you for the next show, maybe. And then they called me for Gremlins 2. So then, but this was after the R&D period where Steve and Matt had already done tons of designs for some of the main characters, Mohawk, the main Gremlins, background Gremlins, and so on. And they hired tons of artists just to help design and all that stuff. So Tim Lawrence comes into, because he had migrated to ILM at the time and was working on Ghostbusters 2. And he called me and said, hey, you want to come up and work on Ghostbusters 2? And I said, sure. I'm in Japan now, I think. When I come back, yeah. And then they had called me to work on Gremlins. And I'm like, oh my God. And they had already set up an apartment for me up in ILM, up north, all this stuff. And I had to call Tim and say, Tim, I'm sorry, but Rick Baker is calling me to work on Gremlins 2, and he's my idol. I know I said yes, but I feel like a total jerk. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. And, the rest is history. So I chose Rick. He's my idol.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when I got hired on Gremlins 2, I was mainly in charge of the effects. So, hey, Eddie, this gremlin needs to bubble. His back needs to bubble up when water hits it to figure it out. Hey, there's these cocoons. They need to look like they're breathing, and they need to be in the pipes up in the attic. So, you know, figure it out. And that was kind of like my job on it. So that was so fun because I got to figure out effects similar to what Tom Savini does, but at Rick Baker's studio and with all these things. And then later I got to do more artistic stuff. I got to paint the Bat Gremlin. And then Doug Beswick did the stop motion for the Bat Gremlin and the Spider Gremlin. And Steve Wang was my idol, and he showed me the steps of how to paint the Spider Gremlin. So I painted both stop motion models for the Spider Gremlin and the Bat Gremlin. And, you know, just, it was an amazing experience because I got to do artistic stuff. I got to do engineering. I got to figure out effects. So, yeah. So bubbling backs, melting gremlins.
I love that it was figure it out, and then you were able to learn on the spot. That's got to be.
Well, Rick projects back then were just like, we have time, you know, just we want the best results. So figure it out, you know, and some of the stuff didn't take that long, you know. They wanted me to figure out translucent gremlin ears, and so or mogwai ears, so when light shines through it. So, you know, I try all these things, and I was just like, oh, you know, latex, and you put the veins in like this, as like yarn, you know, like Matt showed me with hair and polyfoam, and it looks great, and light shines through it and looks good. And then Rick's like, yeah, this looks good. Okay, fine. So every time Rick approved something, it was like, yeah, cool, you know. So, but that was kind of like, I guess, my proving myself. It's like, hey, figure this out, and I did it. And I don't know if I was just selfish, or I didn't know, obviously, what a business owner thinks. A business owner thinks, I want to give this guy a project, and I don't want him to ask me any questions because I have 100 other things to deal with, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, I was just selfish. Like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to ask anybody. I'm not going to bother anybody. And so I did. That's exactly what kind of I think Rick was looking for at the time. So it all worked out.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah. And then I mentioned his name before, and then obviously you know it from being in the industry, but Brian Usna, then next year later you worked on the Guyver, right? And he produced that?
Yeah. So Steve was, okay. So if you haven't interviewed Steve, or your audience doesn't know about him, he is this groundbreaking artist. Okay. Meaning, like, I have a few people that really changed what stuff. So there's a million amazing artists in our industry, right? And they can make amazing stuff. It's always cool. You're always going to get a cool reaction. But somebody that really changed the game, H.R. Giger, right? H.R. Giger had this style that is so H.R. Giger and changed creature art, whatever you want to call it, forever. That's a milestone. The next person, in my opinion, Steve Wang. He took, back when people were doing zombies and bloated purple colored people and, I don't know, very kind of bland designs, he was doing groundbreaking stuff. And he was taking reptile paint jobs and amphibian paint jobs and saying, this is what should be on your aliens and this is what should be on your whatever. And to this day, we still paint spots on aliens and reptilian patterns because of him. That's how groundbreaking it was. And Predator, he did Predator, right? That's how groundbreaking.
Oh yeah.
And visionary he was. So, and still is. And so, he was doing all sorts of groundbreaking stuff in our industry, and then all of a sudden he said, I want to direct. And he wanted to direct films. He wanted to challenge himself and do the next thing he was interested and passionate. And that happened to be, he had done a film called Kung Fu Rascals, in which he got all his friends, myself included, to do effects for and stuff. And it was shot on Super 8 at the time. At the time, before pre-digital, there was Super 8, 16, 35. Super 8's like amateur format. 16's like pro student format, somewhat pro cinema, and 35 obviously is pro cinema and VistaVision and so on, right? So he was shooting a Super 8, but he's like, hey, look at these transfers I'm doing. They're actually pretty cool, and I think I could do it. So he chose Super 8. Kung Fu Rascals, that was the film. And I did the 2 War Gods for him afterwards. So after he sold the rights or whatever happened to that, he got the opportunity to direct The Guyver. So, the Kung Fu Rascals was his portfolio piece, if you will. And when the Guyver opportunity came up, he was like, hey, Eddie, you want to work on this and so on? And he was teamed up with a guy named Screaming Mad George,
I love him. Yeah.
Yeah, Japanese artists. So they were co-directing. They were both directing the film. And they got Vivian Wu at the time, and she was huge, and Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, to be in the film.
Yeah.
And so this is like, wow, this is like a real film. This is pretty cool. It's not Kung Fu Rascals anymore. So I headed up the creature department along with a guy named Moto Hata, who has passed away. Brilliant artist. He did Mark Hamill's creature for the film. And Steve assembled some of the best effects guys in town. Jim Cagle, George Ushell, Moto, myself, Scream Man George did one, and then, of course, Steve designed the Guyver. And everybody kind of had their own creature to do. And my creature was named Lisker, and that was like the main evil guy. And I just remember Steve would art direct me and coach me. He's like, "Hey, Eddie, this is your predator. This is your predator. You know, make it good, make it awesome." It's like, "Oh yeah, Steve, yeah, it's gonna be as good as I can make it." And so that was the Guyver. So it was just monster making orgy fest just for creatures. Yeah, so and to this day there's like this fan group out there which I never even heard of, and they contacted me. I had made a Lisker little model kit for a Japanese company that never got produced, and these guys are like, "Hey, how much money can we raise for you to cast it and send us copies to everybody that wants one," and so on. So this whole kind of sub underground fan base that I never knew about. I was like, "Oh wow, this is so cool." So yeah,
awesome.
that was Guy.
I talked to Peter Spellos, who was in that movie.
Oh yeah, that's right. How's he doing?
He's good. He was one of those guys that worked with a lot of Roger Corman and Jim Wynorski, who did Return the Swamp Thing. So he did a lot of those movies. But yeah, no, he loved that. That's another movie he told me too, that he was getting contacted about like this cult of that movie, and like
exactly
working with Mark Hamill because he was a huge Star Wars fan. So
that's so cool.
and then I pretty much from there, obviously you had the connection with Rick Baker. You have Batman Forever, Men in Black, all of these different movies.
I was pretty much at Rick's studio for 13 years, and I never knew about the outside, never cared about what was going on, all the other movies and other studios, and just was so comfortable there, working alongside, Matt Rose, Aaron Sims. It was like a family. I mean, we're just this tight-knit family. Whatever project Rick got, he would immediately come down and share with us how the meeting went and what the director said and all these hilarious stories. How directors perceive effects and how they can do stuff and all this stuff, and his stories of, the studio doesn't pay me, and he's always trying to go after them to get his money. And eventually that led to him being, sick of the business, which is so unfortunate and left a bad taste in his mouth. But invaluable experience. I mean, it was so, Rick, I never went to my prom, and like I had a date with a young lady one time, and Rick was like putting my tux together using two-sided tape. I mean, 'cause I was like 18, 19, when I started there. So he was so much like a father figure to me, and saw me grow up, and I learned so much at his studio, which is, to this day, that's why we're still such good friends. And so yeah, I mean, every movie that went through Rick's shop, I was lucky enough to be a part of, and eventually I became one of the designers there. These days they call them concept designers, and I didn't realize back then, but I was just sculpting maquettes because we didn't have computers. We just would sculpt things in clay and little models and things. So Rick would get a show, we'd read the script. Okay, there's a monster, and then we would, sculpt the maquette of our version. Matt Rose was one of those guys that did always incredible designs. I was lucky enough to be somebody that was able to do that too. And
Wow.
Aaron Sims, and so on. So, and that was our lives for years. And eventually he moved to this bigger studio where we all got our own little offices. And I could just turn the lights off and just have focus on my sculpting. And that's all I did for years. That's how I honed my skills and stuff like that at Rick Baker's studio. And then, I don't know, one morning Gary Oldman will walk in. And it's like, oh, hey, who are you here to see? And it's just so surreal. But it's so, at the same time, so cool,
Do you remember like the first one? Because on IMDb, it's never like 100%. But like they have for Batman Forever, Sculptor.
Yeah.
Next
Batman,
to your name.
Yeah. And at this time, I was kind of like, I always saw myself as the guy that would jump in wherever we needed me to pick up whatever needed to be picked up. So I sculpted the miniature bat body on that movie, as well as, was that the one with Mr. Freeze? I can't remember.
That's Batman and Robin. Forever was
okay.
with
Okay.
Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones, Two-Face and Riddler.
Got it. And did that one have a nightmare bat sequence or something? Big, huge bat? I think that was that. I think
so.
I did for it.
I think so.
Okay, so maybe I was a sculptor. That's all I did was sculpt the bat body for it. And then, I painted the bat wings and stuff and glued stuff together. And that was always like a big thing too. Is like, yeah, you have your superstar sculptors, painters, but those guys, as well as myself, also assemble things, which take a lot of time. Understanding how materials work, fabrics work, to know how to assemble things together, to know to do it before or after the hair work is done or painting is done. Just overall knowledge and kind of supervising and making sure that the project kind of comes together in the order that it should and get sent to set on time. And then if we had to, we went on set with it to accompany it. So yeah, I think on that one, it was mainly the big bat sequence, nightmare sequence, I believe. But then
it's so crazy thinking about it. Like your age at that time, like 95, you're only like 25 or 26.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But I mean,
that's amazing.
I was living and breathing this stuff. And
yeah, no, I know.
At this old age that I'm at, I'm like, if you can be passionate about something and lucky enough, because there's a lot of people that don't even know what they want to do by that age.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're lucky enough to have, I always say art chose me at a young age, then you know what you want to do. You're like driven, you're obsessed.
Oh,
you
yeah.
will fight your parents, you will fight naysayers, you will fight, Don Post Jr. who told me not to do, it's just like, you know what you want to do. And so that was the benefit I had. So I'm lucky and thankful for that. So
yeah. So when was like the switch to like digital? Like what was it, like the late 90s that you had to learn it because you knew all of this?
Yeah. So
where was like the switch?
Okay, so all of us as makeup effects artists are watching the movies, right? And then Abyss comes out. Terminator 2 comes out. We're all just, every time we see it, we're huge fans. Of course, we're watching. We're just like, digital's going to take over, but they can't do skin. They can't do skin or hair. And we're going to have jobs. We'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, whatever, Golem comes out. And like, oh, crap. Or Jurassic Park. And then we're just like, shit. Like, okay. So they're getting better. Eventually, they're going to do skin. Eventually, they're going to do hair. They can do dinosaurs. Mighty Joe Young comes out. And it's like, oh, okay, he's full of hair. Fuck. It's like they're replacing the gorilla hair. And then I was just like, okay. And my friend Aaron Sims already saw the writing on the wall. He got himself a computer, which I didn't even know what the hell it was at the time. Really. I mean, seriously, we did not know. I didn't know how to use a mouse. I didn't know what a computer was. except that it was super expensive and it was a box and a keyboard on it. I didn't understand the concept. It's just like, what are you doing? Why? How do you get that into a movie? You know? So Aaron Sims bought one, but to be honest, actually, Rick Baker started buying computers, and then he bought like the first Photoshop. He started experimenting with it, and then he showed Aaron. And Aaron's like, whoa, and Aaron got it right away. And Aaron started showing me, because we hung out all the time. Aaron and I were like thick as thieves. And then Aaron's like, you gotta learn this. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then after Golem, I think I was like, okay, what was that you're talking about? And okay, how much does it cost? Okay, and I bought one. I bought a $5,000 computer at the time, and I was just like, holy crap. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know anything about it. So I'd start going over to Aaron's house twice a week, and we would train and learn soft image. And that was the 3D program, one of the 3D programs that ILM used for Abyss, I believe. I believe they used soft image for like animation, and then they used Maya for other things. And so his teacher was a guy named Greg Punchetz. And he was based in Texas, and he had already learned all the digital software. And he was coaching Aaron, and Aaron would coach me. So like I said, I was at his house twice a week, and we would go hiking, do fun stuff. And the whole time I was like, Aaron, I could sculpt it. The one thing I would play with my thumb. I gotta press like 10 buttons to do the same thing. And he didn't get it. It just was not sinking in. Then Rick Baker had his first layoff, and he's like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, you know, and I hate producers and studios and whatever. So he shut his doors. I was just like, oh crap, you know, what do I do for a living now? And Aaron was prepared. He had already been doing digital, had his portfolio together. He migrated over to Stan Winston Studios and showed Stan Winston all this digital technology. Stan had not adopted that yet. And Stan saw the potential. Next thing you know, Aaron's like his main designer. He's like designing AI for Steven Spielberg. He's like doing all these robot designs. The computer's so much faster. He's cranking out photoreal illustrations for AI in like days, you know. So wow. And he's like, Eddie, you gotta, you know, if you haven't loved the computer, you better. This is the future, and I'm doing this groundbreaking stuff. And I'm like, oh crap, okay. So, you know, I hunkered down and kept studying. Rick Baker luckily opened a shop again, and I went back for 3 more years. But the difference was at lunch now. Every single time at lunch, I wouldn't go out to lunch with the guy. I would be there in front of the computer for like an hour studying. What is this? Still didn't kick in. I mean, this is dense right here. This guy never went to college, right? So it's like, I've been doing this crap for like 6 months, and then they changed it. It became Softimage became XSI, and I'm like, what the hell? You know, yeah. I just learned everything. Now the interface is different. All the buttons are in different places. I'm like, F you guys. You know, I was so upset. But I'm like, okay, I just gotta calm down. I just gotta learn this stuff. So I kept doing what I was doing, and then all of a sudden one day, I don't know what got into me. I noticed there was a button that said camera. Because I thought the entire program, the software, was for sculpting, because that's what I'd been taught. I'm like, what is this camera button? And I clicked on it, and there's this like little wireframe camera. Like, oh shit, you know, that's a camera, and there's a focal point. There's another button that says lights. Then it jumped. That day, everything made sense. This is a movie studio in the form of software. It's not a sculpting program. And I started making tunnels, and I started flying the camera through it. And that's the date that changed my life. And wow. From that day on, I was just like, I get it now. I get it. And all this stuff made sense. I'm like, why wouldn't a director love digital? Because they don't have to make decisions on the spot. They can wait 5 months later in post and say, yeah, I like the creature red. Yeah, it should be, change it green. And with a couple buttons, I suddenly just, it's like Space Odyssey, the last sequence, just all this stuff started flowing and it all made sense. So that was the day, man. That was the epiphany. And I never looked back. And I just soaked it up. Everything made sense. I got a portfolio together. Rick Baker had a second layoff. And I was ready. And I just did what Aaron did. And I got my first job at a place called Pixel Liberation Front, where this guy, Kent Secchi, was just like, I don't care if you know the software. What's on your reel, what you've done, and with your practical effects knowledge, I want to hire you. That was my first digital job. And I was doing rendered shots for Sky Captain, World of Tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
And I was blown away. I mean, totally different environment, man. It was just like makeup effects. I could sculpt and I could insult my friends over there and I could have fun. Digital production for me, the transition was just like, it's like information going in your brain every day. And they don't make it easy. The shots are like called FG457. Hey, Eddie, did you work on FG457 last week? I think so. He goes, I need to stop SR251, pick up FG457. I was just like headache every night that I left that studio. I was like, this is insane. This is ridiculous. I got to start drinking. Sucks. I had literally a headache every night. But that's digital production. So when I hear people ask, have you worked in a digital production environment? Now I know what they're saying. You know, it's highly stressful, very technical, and you can't have the emotions and the time and the patience that you had as a practical artist, because you're like sculpting, it takes time, and you're like joking with your friends, you're listening to music. But this is like, you got to be focused every second. So that, it was a crazy transition. It was really interesting. But sorry.
Well, at least you're able to still work on, people are not transitioning fully back, but you do see more practical effects like being done nowadays, right?
Yeah, I think as a novelty, and as a wise friend of me once told me, it's more like a choice of the director and what he wants. It's like Tim Burton might choose stop motion for a sequence, even though that's technology that was used, you know, back in the 1950s or whatever.
Yeah.
But he thinks that it has an aesthetic to it that's kind of cool, or whatever he wants to do. I believe it's the same thing. It's like, oh, you know, Mandalorian. Oh, you know, throwback to the old Star Wars. We need rubber creatures. You know, and there's a whole fan base with that. So I think it's more an aesthetic choice rather than the technology or whatever. And I believe if a director wants to tell a story, now that I watch films because I like the films and the storytelling.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want the audience to say, hey, that's cool that they chose to use CG instead of prosthetic. I believe if they want it invisible, you know, they'll probably choose CG. And a lot of films I say, I have no idea what's CG these days and what's practical.
Yeah.
Because it's so good. So I really believe we're at a point now where it's just really the style of the director, what they want. It's not a versus thing, you know, so.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's so funny. It is so good at some points because you'll look up things from a movie. I can't think of any off the top of my head. And you're like, what? That was done on a computer. It looks that good. So you're right. There's like that.
Yeah. So, and I love, and it's a whole new generation. You know, it's like we have now become the old guard, and there's this whole new generation of kids and artists that are growing up with 100% digital effects, and they don't know the difference, and they're growing up with it. So now they're going to be used to it, and they are tomorrow's audience. So it really doesn't matter what we think in our 50 and 60-year-old brains, right? You know, we're irrelevant at this point. So we might as well stay home and watch our Scorsese movies. So.
Yeah, right. And then I think it's so cool, some of the things you've worked on, like so many different movies. Like, so when you're a concept artist, when you're brought in for a movie like R.I.P.D. or RoboCop or Pixel, what do they have you come in do? Is it like specific characters or like laying out what the movie should look like?
Yeah, laying out what the movie looks like is more the production designer's job. But yeah, for like Pixels, I was contacted by the costume designer, so she asked me to design costumes for certain characters. You know, R.I.P.D. was a creature thing, and from what I heard, everybody in town worked on it. So they wanted specifically creature A, B, C, and D, and they all had names, you know, and stuff, and they'll have little notes like creature A. I want he's got to be thin, or creature B needs to be a fat, kind of obese character, and so on. So the director always gives you notes, parameters, and then have you design within those parameters and see what you come up with. So, and you know that it's very liberating. It's very cool. So it's almost mathematical now as a concept designer. Input rules, what you got to stick within.
Yeah.
And then output based on what you think is cool, what you've noticed other directors react to, version 1, 2, and 3, and then the director kind of picks. And then I always look at it as a language, like learning a new language, because every director, every artist is different. It's like, I want you to make it beautiful, but what does that mean to me versus you versus this guy? So I can make something beautiful, and they're like, oh, that's creepy, you know. So, oh, okay. So I often give several variations so I can learn the language of what that director is speaking. So once he chooses one, then I know what language he speaks, right? So it's like I'll do several variations. I really like this one. I really like the feel of, oh, so when you said beautiful, you really meant comical, whatever. You know?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the challenge of being concept artist, is really figuring out the language, and then of course that director can communicate with you, which is why directors and a lot of filmmakers, collaborative film, like to work with people they worked with before, because there's a shorthand.
Yeah.
So if I'm new, obviously I want to figure out that shorthand right away, right? So that's kind of the challenge when you're a concept designer.
No, you're right. That's why a lot of directors that I've talked to, they work with like a lot of the same people, because it's one less thing they have to, you know, building that new relationship while you're trying to juggle so many different things. Like you're saying Rick was doing while he was on set. It was like, all right, you figure it out, because my head's in, you know, getting pulled in 100 different directions.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you'll know, like, oh, I'm going to work with whatever, Guillermo del Toro. And when he says red, it means green. Oh, okay, yeah. So there's always that shorthand.
So a couple of things I saw in here that were coming out. Well, one you have coming out soon in 2022, Monkey Man. You designed a mask for that movie? Yeah.
That was so I teamed up with some other artists, Joey Orozco and a couple directors, Kenny Gage, Robert Bukaj. They were forming a studio called Symbolic Arts, and they were like kind of asking me to join. And I had just left a partnership with my mentor, Steve Wang, Alliance Studio. And Steve had told me that he wanted to direct movies and kind of do different things. So I'm like, okay, cool. We had a studio for 6 years, and I said, okay, I get it, no problem. And so I was kind of like a free-floating entity. And then Joey heard that I was around, and then Joey's more of a traditional artist, and of course he was thinking, wow, if I had Eddie as a digital partner, you know, that'd be amazing. So he kind of said, hey, can you park your stuff over here and kind of be part of our studio, and let's see if we can get some projects going. Of course, COVID hit right at that time, and then everything shut down. But we were still kind of working on a few projects, actually. And then I was contacted. A good friend of mine, Kazu, recommended me for Monkey Man. So I brought that into Symbolic Studios. And then that's it. That is Dev Patel's first directorial debut.
Cool.
The main actor in Slumdog Millionaire, which is probably his most famous role. He was also in Lion, which is a movie I loved. And
awesome movie.
Yeah. And yeah, this is the first time he was directing. And I can't say much about it at this point right now, but he had design something very important in the film to the character. So,
Cool.
yeah, it was awesome working with him. I don't think he's worked with closely with effects designers, like the more sophisticated effects type stuff. So it was a wonderful experience. It was awesome. It was short, super short time frame. It's for Netflix. It's going to come out 2022 next year, and from what I've seen, it should be awesome. So yeah.
Sweet. I interviewed Brahim. He's in the movie. Brahim, he's from France, but he's been in a ton of like awesome movies of like bad guys.
Oh,
he's
cool.
been in like The Mechanic 2. Really cool dude.
Oh, nice. You've interviewed a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I love doing this. We started this as like on a whim, and like honestly, one of the first people that said yes was Tim Lawrence. It was like Jerry Minor from SNL and Mr. Show and like a ton of stuff. He said yes. Tim and Lance Kinsey, who was Proctor in Police Academy, were like the first few people that said yes. And then from there, it just kept going. And I just love learning about the ins and outs and just really people's origin stories. I think that's the coolest thing. Like, I'm not the biggest superhero movie fan of the newer generation, but I love origin stories, like hearing your story about how you started. I think it's like so fascinating, you know?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, everybody has a story. It's they're all interesting, and it's like, how did everybody get to where they are, you know? So, but yeah.
Yeah, you got to not only meet your hero, but work with him and form a bond with him that you still have to this day with like Rick Baker, which is neat. So here's two questions. I always try to ask folks questions at the end, and this has been so much fun. You've created a ton of creatures and, over the years. Do you have is there one that stands out that was like your favorite to work on? Cause you have like so many different movies too. Like there's Men in Black, Planet of the Apes. So there's all these different types. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I have a favorite project, and I always mention this project. It was when I was partnered with Steve Wang for Lion Studio, and it was a project for Blizzard, the video game company.
Nice.
And they came to us to do their marketing campaign for their new video game, which is called Overwatch, which is probably old now, but it was the debut of Overwatch. I think they had beta testers all along the way, and the concept was they wanted it to be three of their characters, the main video game characters, to be unveiled as collectible toys that were like 16 feet tall in three different cities that would just magically appear overnight and be on display for the public for like 2 weeks or something like that. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool, but how the hell are we going to do this? And of course it was like, yeah, we could do it. And, so I think I got the call in December, and then I think by February we were in production. So it took all of January. Often these things take, because they're so expensive, it takes a lot of back and forth, financing, contracts. So I think by February we were working on it. It was due by May, I think, including shipping. So what I like to do often is work backwards, right? I'm saying, okay, the size of the things and how you're going to get it there. And we worked with a logistics company called NA Collective, and they were figuring out because the three cities at the time I think were Paris and Los Angeles and an Asian city, which later became Busan. And Paris, the streets are narrow. How do we get this huge thing through there? I loved working with NA Collective and seeing all the people and how they thought about logistics. How do we get these on the trucks? How do we get the trucks to the narrow streets of Paris? Where do we put the trucks afterwards? Where do we put the shipping boxes? All of this stuff goes on behind the scenes just to make that display and set it up, let alone making the display itself, right? So making the figures were pretty straightforward, except for the fact of the time frame. So I did something that I don't think we usually do in film or anything else. I said to Blizzard, because we actually had a pretty good working relationship with Blizzard. We had done a lot of their characters for BlizzCon and so on. I said, hey, we'll do this, but you guys can't make any comments. We got to just keep going. You can't say, I want this changed, I want that changed, or whatever, you know. And they agreed to it. And I was like, okay, cool. Okay, wow. So this is another step forward, right? And so they gave us their video game models, and we modeled in joints, so it looked like toy joints, right? Little ball and socket joints and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I told them, number 2, what we need you to agree on is we don't have the time to make molds and cast these things out of fiberglass. So we're just going to 3D print them and use the prints, right? And these are 12-foot figures. And at the research at the time, all that I knew was heat was probably going to be the worst thing that could happen to them. And they were going to be enclosed in toy boxes. So it looks like a box that you would find at Toys R Us or something, or a toy store. Yeah. And that could generate heat. So we started doing studies on the weather, when the campaign was going to be released. We put fans in there, AC systems, and all this stuff just to counteract that, just in case something were to happen. And so they agreed on that. They wrote off that, and we were on our way. They were like, okay, don't bother us, and we're gonna make this happen. And sure enough, I mean, I can't believe it to this day. And it's something Stan Winston did. From what I heard, stories where Steven Spielberg says, you know, I want a full-scale hydraulic animatronic T-Rex. He says, yep, we know how to do that. After the meeting, Stan turns to his crew, how the hell are we going to do this? You know, we took a little bit of that and just said, yeah, absolutely, we can do this. We got this, no problem. And then we had to hit the drawing board and figure this out. All I have to say is smoothest project ever. We had to divide our team up because they had to be unveiled as close to each other as possible. But of course, with the time difference, I think Paris and LA or something were the first ones, and then Busan was the last one. I went to Busan in Korea with Farah, the character that we did. And then I was able to fly back and see the Trancer character in Hollywood before they took it to the same, like 2 hours before we were going to take it down. I flew back and I was able to be on 2 continents with both characters of the project.
Wow.
But one of my proudest moments, because I was really kind of in charge of the logistics and how we were going to do it, scheduled it, budgeted. Of course, the amazing crew that we had and just the kick-assness that they had all the way through. EGADS, this company in Vegas, did the boxes, which were made out of aluminum, and we secured our figures to the back of it and shoved them into the front. We used the biggest plexiglass sheet we could find in the entire country. And it was a 1-inch thick plexi that comprised the box to make it look like the clear plastic that were on toy boxes. We later found out that fit. It gave us 1 inch on each side of the cargo plane. It was so massive. If we had made it any bigger, it wouldn't have fit. But we thought about all this beforehand. But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Because we looked into the Beluga plane from Air France, which is the biggest cargo ship on the planet. So we really studied the crap out of this thing. And today, still to this day, it's my proudest moment just because of the logistics involved and all the thought involved.
Yeah.
It really elevated me from this, grease paint makeup kid to figuring out logistics for these huge, crazy toy statue things. So that's why I choose that as, to this day, still my proudest moment and favorite.
That's awesome.
Project. So, yeah, it's my
That's
evolution
so cool.
as an artist,
What year was this? Because I'm sure I could find it online. There's probably YouTube videos of that, right? Was that early 2010s, that game, or no?
COVID. It was probably 2-3 years before COVID, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm sure I could find it. I'll look it up as soon as we're done. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and then another question I always like to ask folks, because you don't know, like when you're in the moment on your first set, second set, did you ever have any like keepsakes that you kept from set? Do you have stuff like that?
I have all my backstage passes. I have one from
Oh, nice.
Avatar, The Grinch, Planet of the Apes, all the what do they call it, lanyards or yeah.
Yeah,
I have all
lanyards,
that stuff. And of course, Avatar is one of my favorite because, wow, he became one of my favorite directors. Also because just of his intelligence and groundbreaking, the way he thinks, all this stuff. There's this thing called Masterclass that he speaks on. I immediately subscribed when I knew that he was going to be a teacher, just to see how this guy thinks. I mean, he's amazing. He does everybody's job as if he was a professional in that field. So when he talked to us about makeup effects, he was using our terminology, everything. He's just like a makeup effects guy. So it was amazing to work aside James Cameron. That's why that pass has so much meaning for me personally, to see what he was doing, the groundbreaking stuff on Avatar. And, I thank the Stan Winston guys for accepting a Rick Baker alumni into their studio when Rick closed his doors to give me that experience and give me a credit on Avatar. That was so cool. So,
and I think with Cameron, the one thing that I love about him is that he came up from the, from Corman. The bottom,
Yeah, Corman, Roger Corman. Yeah. He was a graduate, as well as Scorsese.
Yeah, he was doing the set building with his buddy, the late Bill Paxton. Yep. So that I remember watching a video of Bill Paxton, and he talks about when Jim made him audition for Aliens, and he gave him a movie poster tube, and he out in England, and he was like, pretend that there's an alien over there. And he was filming him on a big camera and having him fake shoot with this cardboard poster tube around the room, just so he had it to show whoever he needed to. I'm sure he could make final call on hiring Paxton for that movie. But, I always said that was such a cool story about him. And maybe that's why that's pretty cool that you mentioned that. I didn't know that he knew so much about everybody's job. That's got to make you feel like, hey, I'm going to go to bat for this guy. Well,
that's the reputation that he has. Yeah, he can literally take apart a movie camera and put it back together. He knows everything about it. So any DP that works for him, I imagine, is pissing in their pants because they can't pull their normal tricks. Every artist has their bag of tricks, right? That any director will say, "Oh yeah, that's cool." There's always your go-to stuff, right? But Cameron already knows all that stuff. So you got to bring your A game. Not only that, you got to go beyond that because he already knows. And that's what's so cool about somebody that's really super intelligent behind the camera, writing the story, telling everybody what they should do, because he knows literally costume design, makeup effects, camera, lighting, visual effects. This guy's genius. So anyways, it was so cool to be able to work for somebody like that for the brief time that I did. So, and
Eddie, this has been awesome, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I love talking to people, and it's just that sometimes it's hard to find people that are in special effects and the behind the scenes. So I'm so happy that we were able to connect. And when this goes out, probably in January, I'll send you a link to everything, and then I'll put any links. So if you want to email me any of your links, your company, everything, I'll put it in the episode notes and on my website, just so people can see more about you and check more of your stuff out, man. You've been awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Pleasure.
Thanks, man. Have a good rest of your night. Enjoy that warm weather. I'm freezing my ass off in New Jersey already.
Oh my God. My kid's crossing guards from New Jersey. He was telling me about it.
Oh yeah. It's just it didn't hit yet. And then today is the first cold day. I'm in my studio in the shed, my makeshift studio that I have. Uh-huh. And, that heater, I'm going to have to get another heater out here already. Come on, man. It's not even freaking December yet, and it's already really cold. But
I like the Jason mask and VHS tapes. They're not even.
Oh yeah, I collected. I tried to collect I'm trying to collect all sequels. So I have all the sequels, and then if I happen to have a sequel, I think I had Men in Black, but I don't know where it is. I always try to show it during the interview, but sometimes I got to get more of them.
So you have a VHS.
I'll fill this wall up one day. Yeah. I always had it. That's why I started this podcast. Like when I was growing up, my dad was a garbage man and people would throw out the coolest shit. Like my dad found me like 64s, PlayStations that companies would just like, for some reason, throw it out and it would work. But when it came to like VHS tapes, for some reason, it was only sequels like Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. We had that. There was Weekend at Bernie's 2. So like
they throw out the sequels, is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know, maybe they do. Some deserve to maybe be thrown out. But no, it was just something that when I was a kid, it was like a lot of sequels I had. So when me and my buddy were like, hey, let's start this thing, I was like, you know what? I want to only do sequels and I only talk about a movie if somebody worked on it. Cause I love hearing the behind the scenes and like what goes into the nuts and bolts of it and really just finding out how people started. I think it's so fascinating. So.
Oh, cool. Nice.
And the connection to Tim, man, I think that was so special.
Yeah, that was cool. I didn't know you'd interviewed him. That's cool.
Oh, dude, he was awesome. My daughter was before just another minute, but, when my daughter at the time was only 4 months old and he was very like particular. He's like, I got to do it first thing in the morning. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. And my daughter was so good. She's still great. She's almost 3, the greatest kid ever. And, she like started crying she never really cried like a lot as a newborn, but she was like crying and I'm like, oh, here, take your bottle. And Tim was so nice. And he was like, oh, is she a fan of mine? Has she seen my movies? I'm like, oh man, that's so awesome. And he was just like the nicest guy ever.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool, man. Have a good rest of your night. Thanks, Eddie.
All right, man. Thank you so much, Doug.
All right, man. Peace.